Freshly baked bread doesn't take a lot of ingredients. You can make a really nice sandwich bread with just 4 simple things: flour, yeast, salt, and water. Here are the ingredients you'll need. As you see, it's an easy recipe, and if you want more details, you can click in the link below. You want to begin in a large bowl, put in some flour. You can use bread flour, but I'm using all-purpose flour here, or plain flour. Then I'm going to put in some salt. If you want it to taste like French bread, add the full 2 teaspoons of salt. If you're watching your diet, go down to 1 teaspoon. Next, you're going to need some water, and I like to dissolve my yeast in the water. And this comes from old school where you used to have active dry yeast and you had to dissolve the yeast first. You don't have to do that with the instant dry yeast, but I do find that it just seems to rise the bread better. You want to mix it until you get a shaggy lump like this. Turn it out on your work surface, and now we're going to begin to knead it. Now, if you've never kneaded before, all you're going to do is just push it to its limits, fold it over in half like this, and then push again. Now, if you push too hard, you're eventually going to tear it just like this. I would avoid that, but if you do tear it, don't worry about it. Just put it back in with the dough, fold it over in half, knead it away from you. You can use both hands, you can use one hand. You want to keep going until it's nice and smooth and elastic, and you can stretch it without it tearing like this. If it tears easily, you need to knead it longer. And I'm sorry, you're going to work some muscles here because this is a stiff dough. However, don't be tempted to add more water just yet. It should get more elastic as you go. You want the crumb of the bread to be pretty close textured for sandwiches, so that's why you don't want to add more water if you can prevent it. Now you see how there's a lot of tears here? That's how you know you need to keep kneading. Also, it just feels really hard to stretch it as you go. Once it starts getting easier to stretch, then you know you're really close. Now, if it feels like it's really close but it's still tearing, instead of continuing to knead it, just let it sit for about 5 minutes and then check it. This allows the gluten to relax and the dough is easier to stretch. That means you could have already been done kneading it and you just didn't give it time to relax. In the meantime, you can practice your drumming skills or go clean up some dishes. Now give it a chance again, and you know, this is looking really close. Let me show you a better view of this so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, now see how it's really stretchy, and if you keep going, you can kind of start seeing light behind it. That's what you're wanting to find. It's called the window pane test. Once you get to this stage, you are ready to go. Now, if you keep going and you put a lot of tension on it, obviously you can still tear it like this, but you have to put quite a bit of force behind it to do that. Again, let me just show you how easily this stretches out. It should be really nice and spongy. It kind of feels like a balloon when you get it just right. It should just really just stretch and bounce back like a rubber band. That's when you know your dough is ready for the next step, which is basically sitting around and waiting. And yet here is another animal in the video. I think Jackson, Scout, and Luke have all made an appearance. At this point, all you have to do is get the bowl that you used before. You can clean it out if you want, or you can just use it as it was. Sit it in there and let it take a nice nap. You want to cover it, you can use saran wrap or a lid like I'm using, and just let it sit for about an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours if it's really cold in your kitchen. You want it to look double in size. The next thing, you're going to need a pan. If you're not using nonstick, you want to grease and flour or just oil it or spray it with nonstick spray. And then I like to put parchment paper in the bottom, and that just gives you a little bit of extra insurance that it will come out. Now, if you're new to bread baking, I recommend a nonstick pan. It just takes all the prep work out and makes your life so much easier. But if your pan isn't a nonstick pan, you are going to have to do some prep work. I do recommend at least spraying it with nonstick cooking spray. Later in the video, I will show you a loaf that I completely forgot to spray the pan, and you'll see what happens and why I'm telling you to prep that pan if it's not nonstick. Okay, it has been about 2 hours and our dough is ready. And how to tell if dough is ready: it will look really nice, almost double in size, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. What you want to look for is when you press into the dough, the indents stay but don't collapse or bounce back. If that happens, then you're ready for the next step, which is just turning it out onto your work surface and getting it ready for your pan. There are several ways to prep your dough to get into the pan. You could honestly just plop it in as it is and it would make a shape that you could eat, or you can make it a little more risen by just creating some tension, and what I like to do is make a rectangle roughly that is slightly less wide than the pan. And the reason why you want to make it less wide is because as you're rolling it up, it tends to grow a little bit, and you want to try to keep it about the same width of the pan. I'm using a 9 by 5 or a 13 by 23 centimeter pan for reference. Just roll this up into a log, and as you're going, just give it a little bit of tension by pressing it away from you as you're rolling it up in the beginning, and that just helps it have a nice tall proud loaf in the end. If you see any stray bubbles, you can pop them if you like, but it is not necessary. Now you just want to put this seam side down into the pan. You're going to have to laugh at me a little bit here. I have this thing with saran wrap that I just tend to have it follow me everywhere. I tend to make it a mess, and no matter what I do, it always just seems to not work well for me. I don't know what it is about me. Now, if you like, you could spray the top of the cling wrap so it doesn't stick, but I will show you later on what happens when you spray the top of the cling wrap and why I don't like to do it. Now, about 45 minutes in, you want to preheat that oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius. And you can check your dough after it's preheated, and you want to press into it again and make sure that it doesn't collapse or it doesn't bounce back immediately. If not, it's ready for baking. Now, sometimes it's a little bit wonkily shaped. Don't worry about it if that happens. Just embrace the fact that you're not going to have perfect loaves sometimes. Now, you see this marbling on the top of this particular loaf? That happens when you use spray or oil on top of your cling wrap. Don't worry, it's just a cosmetic thing. Now, if you did it right, it should just plop out right so. And if you didn't, like I didn't with this loaf, which by the way, notice the difference without the marbling, and it has a nicer dome shape. Well, this is what happens when you don't spray your pan and prep it well. It will stick, but thankfully, you have a dog that you can just blame it on. Just say, I don't know what happened, my dog ate a piece of it. In the meantime, just cut into your bread and enjoy it as it is. This is one of Maggie's favorite recipes. She absolutely loves it. Raymond loves it. He's so happy he's wagging his tail back there. And I'll just show you what it tastes like. If you use the 2 teaspoons of salt, you are going to be absolutely amazed. It tastes a lot like French bread. And if it's baked well, it will be bouncing back really well, and you won't see a really heavy line at the bottom. That means it was risen well. And let's give our taste testers a little bit of try. And as you can see, Maggie is going bananas. I wish you could find, oh, there is Jackson. You can see Jackson in the corner. If you look really closely, you can see his nose and his little ears. And there was Raymond, obviously. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Visit us at jacksonsjob.com for more. And as always, happy baking.